Welcome to Title Talks, the show where you can spend some time with the most influential people in the title industry while they share their insight on everything from making your operation more efficient, the latest technology, sales and marketing strategies, hot topics, and more. Before we begin, here are some of the top headlines circulating the title and real estate industries this week. A new study released by Zillow shows that households need to earn more than $100,000 a year to be able to afford the typical home in the US right now. Back in 2020, a household only needed to make about $59,000 a year. For context, the median household income is just $74,500. This report highlights the growing issue of affordability as home values sit near record highs and interest rates show no sign of budging. Speaking of rates, mortgage rates are expected to remain stable according to analysts from HousingWire. With good economic data to start this week, the rates are forecast to stay under 7.25%, barring a poor jobs report on Friday. Finally, after HELOCs for home improvement spiked during the pandemic, home improvement financing dropped by 65% in 2023, where we saw the lowest total for originations since 2016. Data from Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies indicate that remodeling is expected to decline even further this year by 6%. Now, to the episode. It seems like we can't get through a week without news of a massive wire fraud scam or a company falling victim to a ransomware attack. Knowing how to prevent an attack is so vitally important, but so is having a rock-solid incident response plan, or an IRP. So that's what we're focusing on today. We have two guests on this episode: Tom Cronkright, agency owner and security expert from CertifID, and John Kosogof, attorney and the VP of Underwriting and Claims for the Security Title Guarantee of Baltimore. This is a very important episode, so let's get to it. Thank you both for joining me. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about how title companies can prepare and get themselves ready for a cyber attack response plan. Super important topic that we're talking about. And my guests today are John and Tom, and I want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. So why don't you go ahead and let us know about where you work, John, and what you do.
Okay, hey, how's everyone doing? My name is John Kosogof. I'm with Security Title Guarantee Corporation of Baltimore. We're a regional title insurance underwriter. We operate in about 15 states, mostly along the East Coast. I'm vice president in charge of our underwriting and our claims. And of course, a cybersecurity event can fall under the classification of a claim. So that's it's part of what we do.
Thanks so much, John. Tom, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on, Lindsay. And John, thanks for joining. I'm Tom Cronkright. I'm a attorney by trade, large title agency owner here in Michigan, and co-founder and executive chairman of CertifID, the wire fraud prevention solution that now protects buyers, sellers, payoffs, essentially all the inbound and the outbound transfers of money in a real estate transaction. And we also help people recover funds once they're lost. And I'm sure John and I will get into our recovery services division in a moment, but happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're going to talk today a little bit about wire fraud, and we're going to talk a little bit about, cybercrime in the sense of like a ransomware attack. And so what I wanted to start with is, for both of you, we can start with you, Tom. Like, how do most people in the title industry even know that they've become a victim? Like, how are they discovering that they have fallen victim to some sort of cybercrime?
Yeah, I think there's two main buckets right now. There are incidences that relate to your system or your critical infrastructure from an IT perspective. And then there's a loss of funds. And those could bleed into each other eventually, but there's two very distinct risk profiles right now. When we think of system breach, that's, the there was a ransomware, there was a phishing that somebody had given credentials, and they have access to the network. They install malicious software, and that software does a series of things. Your worst case scenario these days is a full malware attack where you're simply prevented from accessing critical programs or the infrastructure itself. And then you have a ransom demand where they require you to pay, typically in some type of a crypto or digital currency, and then they'll provide a key for you to unlock your way back into your own system. That's a real quick flyover of that. The problem is the space in between is what happens while they're in the system, and how do they create programs that scrape data or steal information to ratchet up that demand with further threats that they would, release sensitive information or personally identifiable information on clients or employees should you not pay the ransom. And I think that's the concern we find ourselves. These attacks, unfortunately, are becoming more pervasive. They're harder to detect on the front end, and they're just very disruptive. The cost, the reputational risk, and the backside kind of post-mortem, we call it. What do you do after? It's something to avoid if at all possible, right? That's the system level. And John, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, and then we could go to wire fraud as well.
Oh, absolutely. To go to your question, how do they find out? They've been victimized. They've been shut down. They get a call 2 months after they've closed the deal, and they've got a customer's complaining, my $400,000 mortgage isn't paid off. Why didn't you pay it off yet? Those sorts of things. And we see the news stories. I think it was a year ago, maybe 2 years ago at this point, the city of Baltimore, the recording office had to get shut down because they were the subject of a ransomware attack. He had a couple of, last 4 months, he had some major mortgage servicers that were shut down. And so people couldn't pay their mortgages. And as we've just heard, what happens is on the front end, you don't know that you're a victim already. You don't know a victim until that you're a victim until they pull the trigger. So in a lot of ways that happens is because they're taking advantage of people. No matter how good your systems are, and it could be that you've got a faulty antivirus or firewall, whatever the technology is, but most likely you've got an employee that clicked on a document or clicked on a link, and everything is digital. This communication we're having, we could see each other, we could talk to each other, but really what's happening is all of that's crunched into I and O, or 1 and 0, and it's a digital, and malware is the same thing. So it's popped into the computer and it does its crazy thing. And these people could have been in the system for months, could be a year, before they finally decide that they've harvested enough information. Now they're going to pull the trigger and go for the big bucks. That's the reality, and that's the realm that we deal in.
So it's not always like something happens and then immediately you're aware. There can be a lead time where you aren't made aware
months. Your IT people will tell you got to have backups, right? So back in the old days, we had a little cassette tapes you stick into your machine every night, and the next morning you pull it off, and you had a series of these for every day, and then you had them for every month and every year. So ideally, the backups are done differently now. You got huge computer farms that it's off-site and everything. But the thing is if the infection occurred 7 months ago, that means your data for the last 7 months has been compromised. So those backups aren't any good. And that's part of the strategy employed by these people. It's not just we're going to lock you up today, because what good would that do? Well, who cares? Shut down my computer, wipe it, put the backup tape in from yesterday or whatever the term is today, and we're back in business. No, everything's locked. So Yeah, so you don't know. You typically you don't know, and as was mentioned, it's very, very expensive to go in and figure out how this happened, and who was the person that invited these thieves into your house, so to speak.
Is wire fraud, do you think, different in terms of, like, is it a little bit more instantaneous that you realize that there was some sort of breach or some sort of issue?
It can be, but it'll happen the same way, the same weakness. You get, as an example, not to pick on realtors because it could happen to anyone. You've got realtors, you've got mortgage lenders, mortgage brokers, you've got attorneys that are handling transactions, you have title agents that are handling transactions. These are the people that are being targeted. And why are they being targeted? 100 some years ago, there was a bank robber by the name of Willie Lomax. I mean, he finally got arrested after knocking over a bunch of banks, and they asked him, "Why are you robbing banks?" And his answer was, "Well, that's where the money's at." And that's why these thieves are targeting these people, because they know they're handling these transactions. And in any given month, they'll be moving millions of dollars, millions. And so what they do is they will try to get in to the system so they can start reading emails. If you're handling 10 real estate transactions, which is not a lot, but that's 10 transactions every month where money's being moved. So they find out that you're buying a house and you're going to spend $400,000 for the house, and there's a $300,000 mortgage that needs to be paid off. So they're paying attention to that traffic. They email and get a mortgage payoff, and then 10 minutes later, they have recreated. I mean, a 10-year-old with today's technology can recreate any document, right? I mean, so they recreate a document and say, oh, it's a revised payoff. There's a different interest rate now that we need to, and this is where you send the money, and everything looks right. Everything except for the account number. So, okay, we got a corrected payoff. Now they just sent off 300,000 to God knows where. So that's what that type of situation would be like.
So, we know it's prevalent, and we know there are a lot of steps that you can take to prevent it. So, but we are really focusing on a response plan.
Exactly.
How important is it to have a response plan, even if you've never, had a breach, never had an issue in the past? Like, why is that so important?
I'll let my co-guests lead off on that one.
No, thanks, John. An incident response plan, or IRP, it's a requirement now. And if you don't have one, you'll end up just burning very, very precious minutes and hours once an incident recurs. And it's agnostic as to any incident. As John mentioned, if it's a mortgage payoff, if it's a seller net proceeds that gets diverted, if it's a buyer cash to close, if it's ransomware, it doesn't matter. They take down your email. You have to have a series of steps in place with clearly identified roles and immediate contact. I think of it as red phone to red phone, who's picking up and who's answering the call. And every organization needs to have one. And it's not a one size fits all. Like the wire fraud incident response deals with funds in flight and the movement of money, where a ransomware deals more with information security and infrastructure and fencing, the virus to certain areas of the network where it doesn't expose the whole organization. But the fact of the matter is, if you do not have an incident response plan, you're going to be at a huge disadvantage if something occurs. That's not the time to learn who does what and what calls to make and messages to send, because a lot of ways you may be locked out of your network. I mean, you have to have an out-of-band way to communicate securely that hasn't been compromised. One thing to mention that John said is that we had mortgage servicers that were breached. And one of those mortgage servicers I had a mortgage with, but I haven't had a mortgage on my house in over a decade. And then early January, I get this notice that said my information was compromised. So think about that. So while they were under this, whatever happened, let's call it ransomware, they must have scraped almost an entire database, or at least going back 10 plus years, to have my name pulled out of a hat to say, now we have to enroll you in, monitoring, and you're part of this incident response. And that just, I think that highlights the fact that, yeah, you may be locked out of your system, but what they're doing in the interim can have long-lasting effects. I had forgot they were the servicer. I didn't even know where I made my last payment, right? And here we go, I'm getting a letter. And then 2 weeks later, my wife got a letter the same way. So I think having an IRP, there's just no world where it's acceptable not to have an incident response for anything related to your IT infrastructure or wire fraud.
I agree wholeheartedly. Talking about the red phone, one of the things that anybody in the business should have immediately in an important place that you can grab it. The list of these are the people that I need to contact is the manager at your bank. Because if you call the bank, any bank, you're going to get voicemail. You may end up in a call center in India or in Denver, Colorado, who knows where. And you'll never get through to the person that you actually need to talk to. So those relationships have to be set up, with law enforcement, whether it's FBI or the local constabulary. Certified ID. Hopefully you've got a set up with them because they can begin working on your behalf right away. Your insurance carrier, as far as your errors and omissions or general business liability, because they've got teams of people that can assist you right away. And not only are minutes critical, but seconds are critical. The quicker you can get moving on this, the quicker that you can get the experts involved to help you, the better off you are. Because if you've got no idea, you're gonna lose the whole day.
Yeah. Tom, I know you were on a webinar that I saw not long ago where you were mentioning a lot of times people, when in the cases of wire fraud, will like signal the FBI, but that maybe the CIA might be there are government organizations that you want to flag in that case as well.
Yeah, the Secret Service. So the U.S. Secret Service has just a brilliant team on assisting in active wire fraud intelligence and then notifying receiving banks that there's likely something suspicious about incoming or outgoing account activity or transfers in particular. So the FBI, everything should be reported through the IC3. That's ic3.gov, which is essentially the intake funnel for all forms of cybercrime. That's managed by the FBI, but we partner fairly closely with the Secret Service, and that's why we have a full-time team, a division of Certified that's just fraud recovery services. So a team that are literally around the clock, weekends, evenings, early mornings. And I hate to say this, but it's multiple times a day a victim will find us and will ask for assistance, whether it's coming in through an underwriter, an insurance carrier, a title agency, or it's coming right from the public. And the stories are just sad. And it's every form of transfer. It's EMD, it's your cash to close, it's commissions on the outbound. Mortgage payoffs are probably the largest vector that we see as far as dollar amounts leaving escrow accounts, and then sellers being impersonated. And now we have seller impersonation fraud, where people are trying to steal land and non-owner occupied property by impersonating the actual owner. And that's a whole nother vector. And John, you've got litigation in your neck of the woods there that is kind of leading this argument and putting a pretty tight lens on the mess and the wake that it causes of all things bad for any party involved, including the property owner.
Yeah, we have a really good podcast with Tyler Adams on that we did last year. It was really, really helpful. But yeah,
that has grown. Field. That is the fastest growing vector that we're seeing right now, and there's not a close second. They haven't stopped anything else, but they are just throttling. So just in West Michigan, to pencil it, I get all of the cases that come in from the West Michigan Association of Realtors boards. We had 40 reported last year of seller impersonation instances. Some of them closed. Thankfully, most of them were caught. But this year we're standing on 25 year to date. Like, it's just almost every other working day. Okay, here's another one. I had one yesterday we were running out, was going to be the listing of a $30 million dairy farm here in Michigan. I mean, some of these are just astronomically large numbers.
So, in the case of a ransomware attack, what are some of the things that you think should be the first step? Because you had said earlier, it's really not, an ISP is not one size fits all depending on the type of breach or attack. So with a ransomware attack, what do you think like the first call should be, first steps?
I want to put a sharp edge on this because I believe it to be true. If you're managing your own network and you do not have an outside, at least somebody to respond to security incidents, I'm not saying you have to have a fully managed ISP environment. We used to have a full team from a technology standpoint in our agency, and we outsource all that because I think the world has shifted. IT before used to be, my computer turns on, I can get to my programs, I can print, I can scan, right? I think of it as all green lights are on and blinking green. But now it's information security. There's a whole layer of that deals with securing the entire framework that we think about, how we connect to the internet, to the firewalls and some hardware that John mentioned, to application security, to user behavior. And each one of those disciplines has kind of a core competency, and it's moving so quickly, just simply keeping up on patches that are issued, either 0-day or irregularly scheduled patches. Microsoft isn't sending you a patch because they finally fixed the glitches in Word. They're sending it because they found a vulnerability, right? So I think first and foremost, you need to be aligned with a company that has created an incident response plan and a framework, and that either chief information security officer or somebody equivalent has to be the first call. And then the second call is probably to the insurance carrier, because John brings up a really good point. If you have cyber, and a lot of cyber coverages do cover ransomware in some level, they may take over the entire incident response. I mean, we've heard of them like flying in teams and like a team of experts working on behalf of the insured to get that done. But again, it has to be somebody at a high level that has direct access to either completely take a network offline. And that's what we've seen at the tail end of last year between some underwriters and some of the mortgage servicing companies. I call it cutting the cord. They just flat out cut the cord. Like, we are just, there's no communication. We're taking this entire system offline. And then we start to investigate, as John mentioned, what's the scope of this thing?
I agree completely. Those have to be your first two steps. And then depending upon what happens through your investigation, then you move on from there. You know, who do you have to report this to? What authorities do you have to report to? Who's your regulator? You know, agents are licensed by the state. Has anyone's information been compromised? Tom mentioned getting a letter. His wife got a letter. I don't keep track of the letters I get anymore. You know, each one of us, our information is out there, you know, at least from 5 to 10 different incidents. You know, so we end up having now to live our lives knowing that someone's got that information. The only good part about it is that when they take these data dumps, it's hundreds of millions of files, and do these people have the time to go through all that to put it together? Perhaps they're working on programs to amass all that information, and that's where then, as Tom was mentioning, these seller impersonation frauds take place. You know, they're getting enough information about these people to be able to pull off a scheme like that. You know, because otherwise, how are you going to know who owns that property? Where's their mortgage? I've seen situations where they had the social security number, they had the driver's license number. So with the fake ID, it had the right number, but and all the other right information is just the wrong picture. So yeah, it's
John, I'll echo that. We just thwarted one, and they actually had an account in the actual property owner's name to receive the wire. So social
Right.
security number matched, the driver's license matched. It just had a picture of, I'm assuming it was a money mule that would have shown up for closing. And the bank account information was set up in the name of the seller. And that level of sophistication in the IDs were, I mean, I was told by law enforcement, like they must have received a copy of the ID somehow. Like this was a digital imprint of the picture, but nothing else had been doctored of the actual physical ID. And that's a hard thing in our industry, because as we think about the closing ceremony and that process, either in person or remote, we're not spending more than 30 seconds validating, not even that maybe, that the piece of plastic or the US passport does look like it's John, or it looks like it's Tom, or it looks like it's Lindsay. And then you go on to, hey, fill out this form, and where do you want your money? And here's a few documents, and okay, nice to meet you. And in an envelope or a copy machine it goes. And I think that's where we're going to be shifting from this idea of ID validation to identity verification. And I think that's going to be the shift of, should there be another layer that we think about when we open title and we start this process, just to confirm that everybody is who they say they are.
Yeah. In the case of a ransomware attack, is that, you mentioned, Tom, the, incidences at the really large underwriters or large mortgage, organizations, banks. And so, like, is it something that small or mid-sized title companies are really worried about?
They should be.
Ransomware,
Yeah, they
specifically.
absolutely should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's, John, you'll probably see this because John and I probably hear more things that are not public than are public, right? And there's a lot more of it going on in the agency world than what would ever be disclosed. There's a lot of those small, I call it singles and doubles. Yeah, you'll have a home run where you take down a national underwriter or a bank or a servicer, but they're out there playing singles and doubles all day, every single day. And I think those are really the ripe pickings, because, if you can get to a national underwriter that has hundreds of millions of dollars invested in information security, or you could focus on somebody that has on-premises computers with an outdated router in an outdated license on their virus detection, and nothing like SentinelOne or any of these programs that can detect and kind of quarantine these types of viruses from spreading into a broader basis. I mean, yeah, if nothing else, just scraping data and monetizing that in the dark web to finish the profiles that John mentioned that they may have received from, a retailer breach. Or we had everything last year. We had retail, we had telecom, we had underwriting, we had mortgage servicing. I mean, you can't believe that there's a world where your stuff is not out there if somebody's willing to either find it or pay a few bucks to obtain it.
Agreed. Yeah. If the small to medium sized agency is not concerned, then they should be, because it's a situation. It's not if, it's when. There's a target on all of these people. It's when will that trigger be pulled?
Yep.
Yeah. So what are some things in your organization that you can do to just make it safer and better for your employees to respond properly?
John, I'll let you lead off. You deal with a lot of agents. Yeah.
Well, first off, I think that they need to honestly take a look at their network infrastructure and honestly take a look at who is responsible for making sure everything is up to date and that they've got good and valid security. Maybe your nephew is in the business and he's not just working out of his parents' basement. But that is so critical. The technology, that component of it, that is so critical, because that's your door. Unfortunately, the infrastructure has been created to make it easy to communicate, to make it easy to transfer information. We did not, or the industry did not, think of security as the overriding goal. Security belatedly became a second thought, and now we're always trying to catch up with it. As Tom mentioned, your system has to be set up to get those patches in. You better make sure that you've got the latest antivirus, but even that's not going to help you. But if you don't even have that, you're just in a whole heap of trouble. Secondly, there are different training programs that can be signed up. Some of these are very elemental and perhaps even boring. We ourselves, in my company, we each have to go through a video session that takes maybe 5 minutes of your time every month, and you're tested on it. And our IT department sends out phishing emails to employees to see whether or not we're clicking on it. And if we do, then that person needs to be re-educated, if you will. But those types of things, that yes, fear. You have to instill fear into your employees, because whether it's a ransomware that shuts down the system, you're out of business. Okay, the large underwriters, they've got plenty of money. The large mortgage services, they've got plenty of money. But if an attorney or a title agent gets shut down, that means he can't do business. And that's how they make their money. So if it takes a week or a month before they're up again, that's a week or a month, or how long it takes, where they're not collecting funds. If they're not collecting funds, can they pay their employees? You're taking a look at the term reputational risk. If their reputation gets hit, we're not going to them. They're not doing anything to protect our information. And look at that. They lost $500,000 there. How many customers is that going to impress? So, and if you do lose that $500,000, where's that money coming from? Did you comply with all the requirements in your insurance policy, or did you not, so that the insurer could say, no, we're not covering it? Where are you going to get that money? Do you have that in your bank? You need to sell off the funds that you have in your IRA, or do you need to get another mortgage on your house? And if you don't do that, you're out of business. So these are real dollars and cents that have a huge impact on these agencies and on these attorneys. And so the employees should be aware of that that's, I got a customer that's going to be out of money, but I'm going to be out of money too, because I might not have a job. My boss isn't going to have a way to pay me.
Yeah. We think of it, Lindsay, as kind of a layered approach. And I agree with everything that John said. And I think the layers provide this like exponential benefit, not just a linear benefit. So we think of it in terms of like education, technology, incident response that we talked about in insurance. The education, so if you're a small agent, let me think about answering the question directly without veering too technical. You got to think that 9 times out of 10, the human error, some human element, is going to be involved as the start of the breach. Okay, so I clicked a link. John had mentioned, hey, here's an updated survey, here's an updated payoff, here's an updated CD, here's just something. And just by simply opening or even hovering over long enough now, they can start to embed software into the computer, malware. So what is kind of the pulse of the organization around just phishing? Just start with phishing. How do you identify where the origination of the email is coming from when they're trying to mask through different layers, right? Second or third degree layers of email ID masking. And then do you have, as part of your culture, you said the word, and it starts from the top, do you have a culture of compliance and curiosity? We call it human firewalling, right? So how do we create this human firewall that they are the first, and I would argue they're the most effective line of defense that we have. And you just train and you show them, hey, we're not a target as much as we are anyone else, but here are all the bad emails that came in. Here are the things that somebody could have clicked on that they didn't. When we run our monthly email reports, somewhere between high 80s to low 90% of all email trying to come into our servers has been flagged as either malicious or spam. So call it 9 out of 10 emails that are just bouncing off the dome because we have these filters in place that make sure they don't hit the eyeballs of our users. And the other thing to educate, and you get cultural lifts. So I'm talking to you title agency owners right now in particular. If you come alongside and show your employees and your vendor partners and referral partners how to secure their email accounts, how to turn on multi-factor authentication, how to manage passwords through complex password managers, how to even see if your email's been compromised through rule settings, and then let them know that this is just good hygiene for you as an employee, for you as an individual, and the family, they love that, right? I'm actually drafting right now a post seller impersonation identity theft roadmap, because what we're seeing is exactly what John's seeing, is that they've got a full workup on these people. Yeah, I'm trying to steal your land, but I already have an ID in your name. I've got the bank account set up. I'm ready to roll. Well, we thought it necessary, just because it's a good thing to do, to say, hey, here's a roadmap to get your identity protected because it has been compromised. And once you educate on that as an owner, that's everything from your Netflix to your Insta to TikTok, Facebook. It doesn't matter. Like, they'll come in so many different ways. And then part of that, I can't say it enough, even if you don't have a third party that is managing your network, at least have a third party come in, do a scan or a penetration test, identify the devices that are connecting to the network to see if they can even support the patches. You'd be surprised. An old machine can be a machine that can be exposed regardless of the software that it's running. So I see the people side of it, I see the hardware side of it, and then you have kind of this digital side of it through technology. You got to manage all three.
So, John, from your perspective, what are some things that agents can look to their underwriters as a resource that you guys can help with?
Well, we could certainly help put them in touch with people like Tom. Certainly give them the information as to what law enforcement that they may or that they should be in contact, where it should be reported. We can reach out to some of the contacts that we've got within law enforcement, depending upon the jurisdiction. And we'll begin working on trying to figure out how it happened, where the money went to, that sort of stuff. But by the time we get contacted, and by the time Tom gets contacted, a lot of times it may be too late. I mean, we begin working as quickly as we can, but it's but that shouldn't discourage people, because you need to, as soon as you find out that you have a problem, you need to start reaching out to those that are on your team. This is not something that you can hide, not something you can ignore. You need to immediately reach out, because then at least we can start doing damage control.
Yeah, but John, I mean, your stuff. I mean, your agents could reach out and just have a lunch and learn with you to talk about these things. That's what as an agent, you don't think of the underwriter as anything other than, I need pragmatic underwriting and I need responses that help me through. And yeah, I need, help through my audit annually, but you can also be, I think, a really great guide into some of these areas, especially for your smaller agencies or law firms and closing attorneys. Say, let's just talk about this, right?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. It's education.
Right.
We're talking about post-mortem here. Post-mortem many times is too late. So it's education and preventing. The old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, I think in this situation, a penny of prevention is worth thousands of dollars of cure.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the differences in values that we're looking at. So, yeah, I mean, we could certainly assist in the cleanup, if you will, in the attempt at recovery, but it's so much more important to put in place what needs to be put in place in order to prevent it from happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, John, with all the noise around commissions and the lawsuit and the settlement, and then, whatever it is, this whole thing is landing. It seems to be in a direction where consumers are going to have more work to do potentially on their own, especially buyers. And what we have seen is fraudsters do not miss an opportunity of disruption. So if there is a world where the buyer is alone on their journey, at least to some point leading up to contracting, without representation from a licensed agent, that's just a walk of vulnerability that they're going to embark on. And that's where I think we as the title and settlement community can fill a very important gap there, if we can get the message out to say, look, I want you to have an agent. I mean, it's going to be a more efficient process. You're going to be more educated. They'll likely educate you about wire fraud prevention because we beat it into their heads like crazy in our markets. But for the consumers, I think there's also a direct-to-consumer message that says, hey, however you end up under home ownership, there's a 30 to 45 day gap of vulnerability that they need to be aware of.
Agree completely. Absolutely. The other thing that I would stress is if you're dealing with someone that no one's ever seen or met, 99% of the time it's a problem because that person really doesn't exist, or that person's pretending to be someone that they're not. And that's where, talking about the agent, that agent should have had face-to-face, even though we may have a fake ID where we've got a picture of someone that isn't that person, but there may be other indicia that something isn't quite right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the other thing we're seeing, Lindsay, is the use of artificial intelligence to advance social engineering.
Yeah.
So when you talk about deep faking videos like this in real time that have been reported, the ability to take a recording of anybody's voice here and within 10 seconds of recording a snippet, you can put it into an AI tool like 11 Labs and you can just make it say whatever you want it to say. And I think that type of new technology really needs to cause a reframe. So we talked about incident response. I'd like to take a minute to talk about standard operating procedure, right? So we need to start thinking about, if a technology like this, if I could mock up John's voice, and John is one of my key underwriters or a key referral partner in market, and I got a voicemail that seems like it's coming from John, and there's a call to action for me to look at my email about a wire transfer or something that is going to lead to the movement of money or sensitive information, we have to have the ability to take a step back and say, can I even trust a voicemail anymore? Can I trust a quick video snippet anymore that looks like it's coming in from FaceTime or something like that? And all of that is just true, guys. Whether or not you believe I'm talking about stuff that's on another planet, it's happening in real time right now. And that's where we're constantly tuning both the certified platform and our standard operating procedures as a large agent in Michigan to say, hey, we're just going to become more curious. We're going to become more skeptical. And as a leadership team for both companies, we'll give the employees and the team members the space to investigate and raise their hand before they act on an impulse, before they act on some demand, some artificial demand that they believe is coming from either leadership or outbound from one of our customers.
Yeah, really, really good points. Well, thank you both so much. Really appreciate you joining us. And I hope that everyone stays safe out there, right?
Thank you. This was great. Stay happy, stay healthy.
Agreed. Thanks for having us on, Lindsay. Great conversation, John.
Thank you. It was great.
For any resources mentioned in this episode, check out the description for a link to our show notes. Thank you again to Tom and John for chatting with us. If you're looking for a vendor partner that will help you scale and grow your title operation, PropLogix is here to help. Learn more about our time-saving services by visiting proplogix.com/services. Until next time, happy closings.